Joining me now is News Corp columnist Angela Mollard and Sky News contributor Louise Roberts. Ladies, the much anticipated Royal Tour is finally done. I feel like we've been talking about it for months. Angela, what were your highlights, particularly of the visit to Sydney?
Oh, look, my highlight is an overarching one, which is that the mini tour is the new future of tours. Short, sharp, effective and cost effective. In fact, it was so fast and so, that last day was so busy. My actual takeout favourite moment was Camilla wearing bare feet. She was exhausted after that long Tuesday with this photo here of her walking up the steps to Admiralty House. And I just thought, as you just mentioned, these are two people in their 70s, a day of wearing, and she held multiple engagements on the Tuesday, a day of wearing high, they're not high heels, but kitten heels all day. She was just like the rest of us. She was completely exhausted, but lots of takeouts from the entire tour. But I do think the key is that let's have some more tours of this length and brevity because they don't cost so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very, very good call. And we'd rather have them for a little bit than not at all. Louise, a cracker of an article by Des Houghton about the food and wine served to their Majesties, comparing it to the French state dinner. Is that just a reflection of our more relaxed approach to these things?
I do think it is, Cara. I mean, Des makes an excellent point. He's a wine expert. I love his tasting notes, and he does make a great comparison between the dinner that President Macron put on for Charles, which was very lavish. I mean, goodness, they were marinating poultry in champagne for the dinner itself. So it was certainly very lavish. Cost $750,000, 150 guests, the top-notch wine and food. And Macron was sort of able to write it off as a bit of a soft diplomacy exercise. But I think what we've seen, particularly for PM Albanese's dinner, is that it was soft diplomacy, fantastic Australian style in a way, that we had wines, none of which were over $35 a bottle as well. And the planning for a royal banquet or a royal dinner is very particular as well. So they would have been very strategic about having food and wine, in particular in a cost of living environment that wasn't too expensive, but also offers that soft diplomacy and gives local winemakers a real boost to their credibility and their profile. So I think Charles and Camilla played it brilliantly there.
Yeah, I think that was played very well. I agree. Now, Angela, a Roy Morgan poll out this week on the popularity of the royal family in Australia. What's the result, and is there any notable commentary from those who were polled?
Yeah, there's a really good commentary, and this is great because we usually just get the figures. This has got some analysis in part. But look, 57% of people want to retain the monarchy versus 43% who don't. Now, what's interesting about this is that if you were to go back 2 years to when the Queen died, there was slightly more, 3% more were in favour of the monarchy at that stage, 3% more wanted republic. So there was that slight change there that we've seen. But 3% is nothing when you consider that when the Queen died, we thought that that would be the end of the monarchy. We would just be completely wanting the Republic. But it turns out in their analysis, the Roy Morgan poll, is that people actually want the stability of the current system. They actually like our connection to heritage and tradition. They're concerned about a presidential model and corruption that might associate with that. On the other hand, they do want independence, but at this stage, they're more inclined to stick with what they know rather than change it. And interestingly, more women want to stick with the monarchy. 60% of women are in favour of sticking with it. And I think that's very much to do with the softer topics. Louise mentioned soft politics. It's also about soft issues that have gone on for the royal family this year. Health, cancer, Kate and the King. I think there's a lot of people, particularly women, who look at them and they actually feel a lot of support and sorrow for this family.
I think that's quite right. And I think also Australians are focused on a whole bunch of other things, and in particular those cost of living issues. So anything that brings stability, I suppose, helps with that, not necessarily looking for change. Now, Louise, after leaving Australia, their Majesties visited Samoa. We have seen some great photos, some great footage from that part of their visit. What were the highlights for you?
I think the highlights were the fact that they were able to go to Samoa together, and it was their first trip there together, obviously, as King and Queen as well, and they had the most fabulous welcome, pretty much similar to what happened in Sydney. Charles was able to obviously attend CHOGM. That was the whole reason for his visit there in the first place. And Camilla was meeting with the Commonwealth Women's Association as well to talk about sort of gender violence, which we know is a big issue for her in the UK and something she's very close to and does campaign on the rights of women for. So they were able to both tap into their respective topics. Again, Charles talked about sustainability, which was great. But for me, one of the standout moments was when the camera sort of cut away and we could see Camilla wiping a tear from her eye. And obviously it was the end of their trip in Samoa as well. They were in a beautiful little village there at the time, and Charles was given an honorary title, and he was so moved that he said he was devoted to that part of the world and he hoped he'd be well enough to come back and visit again. And there was no hiding Camilla's relief, and perhaps there was a tinge of sadness as well, and hope that, of course, she too wants to go back there and hopes that Charles is well enough to travel again. So it was a very moving moment. I don't think it was really scripted either. That's what, for me, made it most special in Samoa.
And such a great way to tie up that whole tour before they both headed home. Now, Angela, the Sussexes have released the paperback version of Spare while the King and Queen were in Samoa. It's been suggested that it's an attempt at sabotage, but do you think maybe that's just pitching it a bit high?
Look, it could be, or it could actually be accurate. We've known about the dates from the King's tour for quite a long time. Harry, publishers generally state the date that they're going to make drop a paperback copy of the book. But that said, Harry and Meghan have a lot of power in this. Of course, he is the biggest earning author for the publisher in any time in history. So, of course, he will have a bit of sway on when that would drop. And I would be deeply upset if that was the case. And we know they've got form on this as well, Caro. We know that they've dropped things in the past when Catherine was appearing at Trooping the Colour. We hadn't seen her for a long time. Meghan dropped her jams. What's really sad about it, though, to reiterate and talk to Louise's point, is that if indeed this may have been the King's last tour to this part of the world, and we don't know that because we don't actually know the severity of his illness, then that's a pretty cruel thing to do to your dad, isn't it? To steal his thunder when he's potentially thinking about the fact that this could be one of his last trips. This was his 17th visit down here. As you mentioned, he's a man who turns 76 next month. They're old people, and if he's sicker than we know him to be, then what a cruel act by Harry.
Yeah, Paul, that's one way to put it. And despite the King almost turning 76, a new royal carriage was unveiled this week. Here's a sneak peek.
What we're looking at is a new coach that I've made especially for His Majesty the King. In London, there hasn't been a new coach made for a king since 1761, and that, of course, was the Gold State coach. But I've always wanted to make something very special for His Majesty to commemorate his reign. So this is the vehicle that has taken me now just on 6 years to make.
Louise, it's divine. What can you tell us about it?
I know. Isn't it wonderful to see a new carriage made? And the man speaking there, of course, is Jim Frecklington, who has his sort of carriage workshop just near Manly in Sydney as well. And he's really devoted his life to making these beautiful creations for the King. And all the stats are mind-boggling. It weighs over 3,000 kilograms. It has steel in it from the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It has door handles from Sydney Opera House as well. Every flower from every Commonwealth country is represented there. There's spinning elements there which are just incredible, spinning crowns as well. It's the most beautiful creation, and I'm watching this and feeling a tinge of sadness as well because poor Jim too is also battling cancer, and he talks about it being his legacy, this final carriage for King Charles.